On a typical day in the 80s, Tommy Glenn Carr Michaela life was about to change dramatically with an unexpected visit to his small television repair shop in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tommy was in his 30s and lived an ordinary life as the owner of this shop, which he called STV Sales and Service. He had been fascinated by electronics and repairs since childhood. However, as a man who had been married and divorced 4 times, with a criminal record for minor drug offenses, he had begun to tire of Tucson's quiet life. And the spark Tommy sought in his quest for adventure was found when his old friend, Ray Ming, who lived in Las Vegas, showed up. Ming arrived at the repair shop in Tulsa with a real slot machine in the trunk of his car and the most advanced cheating device of the time, the top-bottom joint. When the device was tested on the machine, Tommy saw that the slot machine could spit out handfuls of money with this tool, and dollar signs appeared in his eyes. This trick device short-circuited the slot machine's primitive circuit board, essentially tricking the coin hopper. So, if this wire was inserted into the right place on the machine, the device would act as if it had hit the jackpot and start spewing out money. Tommy, who was bored with life and looking for new thrills, was mesmerized when he saw this. This simple wire could save his life. Before long, he decided to take his 4th wife with him, close the shop, and go on a short gambling spree. Of course, their destination would be Las Vegas. With his eyes on the money, Tommy went to Vegas and tried out his wire trick. But since these were his first steps, he wouldn't try his trick in such big places. In the simple places and small casinos where he tried it, he saw that he was successful. The bonus was $50. But in the end, regardless of the amount, it was free money. If he played 10 machines a day, he could make at least $500. And if he did it with his wife, the money would double. With these dreams in mind, and after spending a few days with small amounts of money, one night, feeling hungry, he went to a restaurant called Denny around 3 o'clock and wanted to eat something. Luckily, he saw a slot machine that worked with 5 cents, like a children's toy, at the edge of the restaurant. Then he thought, why not get his meal for free? And he went for it. But as I said, since the machine only took 5 cents, the winnings were small. So he started slowly pocketing a wad of change worth $35. However, because he was trying to carry out this operation at 3 in the morning in a small restaurant, he attracted attention. The owner of the premises naturally called the police in response to the incident, and Tommy, the novice, was caught red-handed with a wire in one hand and a wad of loose change in the other, unable to comprehend what was happening. Although Tommy claimed he was trying to start the hotel's car in the early hours of July 4th, 1985, the police understood what he was doing, both from the report and the large amount of loose change found on him. The 35-year-old TV repairman had now added his first conviction for gambling fraud to his record and was sentenced to 5 years in prison for rigging a slot machine. The $35 he had won had cost him dearly, and his curled mustache would have been kissed if it could have been, but instead, it would have been kissed by the devil. Tommy, who spent his time in prison as if he were in a holiday resort making plans for the future, was released on parole in 1987 after serving 2 years of his 5-year sentence. He saw that the gambling industry was undergoing a major technological revolution at that time. Old-style electromechanical slot machines were being replaced by new generation machines powered by microprocessor-based software. This meant that classic cheating methods could be ineffective against these computerized machines. But as I said, don't underestimate Tommy. He hadn't neglected to think up and develop new tricks while in prison, so much so that he would spend 2 to 3 years on R&D. When he returned to Las Vegas in 1990, his first job was to buy a popular video poker machine from International Game Technology. He would essentially dissect this machine in his workshop and spend 6 months researching ways to hack into it. He took it apart, put it back together, dismantled it, and tried to uncover all the machine's vulnerabilities like an engineer. And finally, he reaped the fruits of his labor in a device he named the slider, which had a curved tip and a claw-like attachment. Using thin steel and guitar wire, he created a device that slithered into the machine's coin slot like a snake, triggering a micro switch inside and tricking the coin hopper. As a result, the machine would generously start emptying all the coins inside, as if you had won the jackpot. Thanks to this invention, which emerged after hundreds of attempts, Tommy was about to hit the jackpot, because he would become a real casino pirate by winning real money. So much so that with this newly developed slider, he had started making between $1,000 and $5,000 per hour. He goes to a venue, he sat down at the slot machine, and while pretending to play normally, triggered the machine with his invention, eventually hitting the jackpot and walking away. Moving on to other venues and new casinos, he had truly mastered the formula for making money the easy way. When you consider that there were only around 150 to 200,000 slot machines in Vegas, what else could this be but entrepreneurship, even if it was illegal? Tommy had set up a nice little scheme. However, as with computer games, nothing works forever, and one day the loophole would be closed. Thus, Tommy's scheme had run its course by 1991, and technical improvements made by slot machine manufacturers had begun to render this method ineffective. Still, Tommy wasn't going to give up, of course. On the contrary, this first major success had instilled him with tremendous confidence. In his own words, he had begun to believe that when given a slot machine, he could always find a way to beat it. The monkey's claw was gone, but the donkey's kick was coming. In 1992, he entered the trade show of the dominant company in the industry in Las Vegas, disguised as an ordinary customer. He wanted to take a closer look at the latest model slot machine on display there, and like a curious buyer, tried to learn something about the machine by asking technical questions and keeping the person opposite him busy. Unexpectedly, however, the engineer on duty did not hesitate to open the machine's cover and show him the inner workings, even explaining how the parts worked. Thus, seeing the improved features of the new machine, Tommy naturally figured out how to get around them. According to what the engineer showed him, the new generation of machines counted coins using a laser sensor. In other words, if the prize was 5 coins, the laser beam in the machine's coin dispenser would stop after 5 interruptions, meaning 5 coins would pass in front of it. If you won 10 coins, it would stop after 10 coins passed. Based on this information, Tommy's new invention was the light wand. As the name suggests, the light wand, or light stick device, was designed to trick the slot machine's new laser-based optical coin sensor. Tommy's little device was just a bright mini bulb connected to a camera battery. When the rigged slot machine paid out, he'd point this bright light at the coin hopper's sensor, essentially blinding it. So the machine, confused by the light, couldn't detect the amount of money it was paying out. Since it couldn't count the coins it was giving out, it just kept paying. You didn't even have to win. If you put $100 into the machine, played a couple of games, and then wanted to withdraw your money, the logic was the same because the sensor was still blind. The light was turned on, the sensor was blinded, and it would take much larger amounts this time, as if saying, "Bring on the money, Tommy." So much so that he had reached a level where he could earn $10,000 a minute. He had toured Vegas, raked in hundreds of thousands of dollars. But deep down, he was consumed by the fear of getting caught again. So he wouldn't hesitate to implement his second plan. You know, people who sell addictive substances generally don't use the product themselves. Tommy had adopted this philosophy. He had started selling unlimited money, which cost him 3.5 for $30,000 in the underground world, and this would be his biggest coup. He was already at ease. He wasn't making unjust profits. After all, he was producing the product and selling it to innocent people who didn't know what to do with it if they consumed it. As things progressed this way, his name began to spread, and his pockets were filled with money. The device that defined this era was so effective that the gambling community would later refer to the mid-90s as the light wand era. And it was estimated that this small battery-powered bulb system had siphoned off hundreds of millions of dollars from the industry, creating one of the biggest casino losses in history. Of course, it didn't take long for casino owners to realize they had a problem. They too had developed new measures for this device, which had appeared out of nowhere. IGT had integrated a new protection system into its machines to prevent this light stick trick. and the devices were back on the market. But for Tommy, this had become like a puzzle game. He bought the new machine, figured out the new protection system, and released both versions of the light stick. In other words, as casinos added new protections, Tommy added new features to his devices to bypass them. As time went on, Tommy and his newly formed gang were also passing through all of Vegas. He was no longer a lone con artist. He was like the mastermind of a criminal organization. Almost every day, he was hunting and being hunted in a different casino. He moved from one machine to another. As if that weren't enough, he sold each new product for $10,000 to $20,000 more than the previous one, making money both from the casino and from those who wanted to rob it. He had become a man who bought luxury homes and cars, went to parties, and traveled the world. He wasn't stingy either. He even rescued a stripper he really liked from that dirty life at a nightclub and brought her into his glamorous life. But as I said, Tommy was a multifaceted and social man. He took his friend Michael Balsamo, whom he met in prison, under his wing. He made him the manager of his new fraud ring and began living his life as if he had left the shop to an apprentice. The ring grew and the money flowed. As new machines came out, new products followed. But just as every story has its but, so did his. On a quiet October night in 1996, our guy must not have had enough money, because he was caught on one of the increasingly numerous security cameras while jamming a machine with a Pro Maxi light stick at a venue in the Vegas skyline. Tommy realized he'd been spotted and tried to quickly get away from the machine. But he tripped over his own feet, dropped the light stick, and was detained by security and handed over to the police. He was charged with possessing and manufacturing a cheating device. However, he was quite lucky and just as cunning, because the outcome of the case would be interesting but lenient. When Tommy attracted attention at the venue, the footage captured by the cameras did not clearly show him cheating at the machine with a device in his hand. The venue was quite crowded, and the man in the footage, Tommy, was wanted for questioning because he was acting suspiciously. Also, since the place was very crowded, the light stick that we knew he dropped might not have fallen from him, according to his lawyers. So this scene was not captured on camera either. Security guards found the device on the floor while following him. They realized he had dropped it. However, there was no evidence. Consequently, Tommy regained his freedom in the following weeks due to insufficient evidence. Although he stayed away from such activities for a few months, his mind did not prevent him from defrauding wealthy establishments. But now that his name was involved in these cases, he was reckless enough not to realize he was being closely monitored. So much so that 3 years later, in 1999, he was caught again while tampering with another machine in another establishment using similar devices, and he had nowhere left to play innocent. Because now he was being pursued by both the FBI and the police themselves, who had caught him in the act of tampering. A detective from the New Jersey State Police whispered, "I was looking for you while cuffing the famous con artist I've been hunting for years. We have a lot to talk about." There was no escape left for Tommy. Investigations and wiretaps revealed that Tommy and his gang had developed not only this light stick, but also a different and much more advanced device called the tongue. Because over the years, slot machines and their manufacturers had also become smarter. The machines no longer emptied the money all at once. They dispensed it at irregular intervals. So the light stick was no longer effective. Tommy's new device, however, was designed to trigger the machine in reverse. The device made the credit loaded onto the machine unlimited, and that credit was withdrawn as if it were change. Consequently, with an unlimited balance, the amount counted by the machine's sensor became insignificant. Furthermore, unlike the jackpot winning trick, there were no sudden bells ringing or sounds. However, as you understand, the gang's device was seized before it could be released onto the market. According to estimates, if this device had been released, the resulting damage could have amounted to billions of dollars. Thus, Tommy, who accepted the charges with a very polite attitude and had his property, vehicles, and money seized, was sent to prison, with the total amount he stole from the market impossible to calculate accurately. According to the decision announced in 2001, He received only 11 months in prison and 3 years of probation, and on top of that, he was banned from all casinos in the United States. In other words, Tommy will never be able to enter a casino anywhere in the US for the rest of his life. His name was written in gold letters on the list. It was strange, to say the least, that he received 5 years for $35 and 11 months for millions of dollars. After his short prison term, he would return to his hometown of Tulsa and try to live a quiet life away from the spotlight, taking care of his elderly mother. Although one of his most iconic moves would be advising slot machine manufacturers years later, after having defrauded them for years. This time, he wised up and called it the Protector. He developed a device that prevented slot machines from being cheated like he had done, and he managed to market and sell these devices to several large companies. However, when the official gaming commission realized that Tommy was the one who designed and sold this device, they concluded that he must have placed a chip inside it. They said, even if no one else can cheat, he will be able to cheat or gain an advantage, and the machines that Tommy claimed couldn't be cheated were shelved. Moreover, since he was permanently banned from the venues, it seemed unlikely he would pursue that path. Thus, Tommy, the former TV repairman who had managed to siphon off millions of dollars, would not be remembered despite the unimaginable damage he had caused to the industry in those years. He barely managed to continue his modest life with his mother, was seen in a few places, and passed away in 2019 with a life story that rivaled Hollywood crime films. Although he was once known as a genius of slot machines, thankfully, he never went back to prison for the rest of his life and lived a straightforward existence. The over $100 million in losses he indirectly caused may have been forgotten by the world and most people, if not by the owners themselves.